Welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. And of course, that is hashtag BTHpod if you're following on social media. I'm your host, Steve McGrath, and today is a first for me. I get to have on for the first time a former NFL GM. It is Doug Whaley, who is now the Senior VP of Player Personnel at the XFL. Doug, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. It's excited, ready for the Super Bowl, especially after those last 2 weeks of playoffs. Those weekends were probably some of the best playoff weekends I've seen in my lifetime.
They were. And since you brought it up, I mean, your last NFL, I mean, what you did with the Bills, your fingerprints are all over that organization. You know, what's it been like for you to see? I mean, we'll get into how you set them up for Josh Allen, but to see what they're doing now and how close they are to actually getting to this game.
Well, let's put it this way. It's not only the Bills, but if you look at the AFC in general, it's going to be a gauntlet, especially with all those quarterbacks that are now playing at a high level and some young ones that have a potential. But the Bills specifically, I think it's exactly what the blueprint was when we decided to hire Sean McDermott and then also set up the Bills up to be in position to strike for a quarterback in the 2018 draft. So all in all, the plan is working perfectly. Now, obviously, they had to execute on that plan, and they've done it really well, and especially at a high level. And the best thing about that is they're showing consistency. It wasn't just a one-year flash in the pan. It was, okay, we're going to be here year in and year out.
This goes back to, and I highly encourage everyone to check out the Go Long podcast that Tyler Dunn runs, because you've been on there a couple times, and what you've talked about is basically, you know, you'll take your odds with having the quarterback, because you just need one guy to show up, you know, for 17, 18 games. Whereas if you don't have the guy, and then you need those, 21 other guys to show up, the odds of having everyone show up week in and week out over the course of the season, aren't as high as just one individual. And the Bills got that guy. I mean, what you said about the AFC being so loaded now with the emergence of Joe Burrow just makes for such an exciting time across the league.
No doubt about it. And that's why I say, if you're a fan of football, then you have to be smiling year to year. Now, obviously, people are a fan of football and then they have their teams. Now, depends on where your team is and what conference they are or what division, you may not be that happy. But the football ecosystem in general, it looks to be on a promising upswing.
And of course, as everything we just said, the Bills drafted their guy. I need to ask you now, if you can put your NFL GM hat back on for 1 minute, look at the Super Bowl matchup. We have a team like the Bengals that obviously have not gotten this far in a very long time. They did sign some key free agents, so I'm not going to pretend like they didn't spend money in free agency, but they hit in the draft. I mean, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, there's so much young talent there. And the Rams, of course, have drafted well, but they got here primarily through big acquisitions, whether it's trades, free agency. I feel like it's specifically trades, though. When you look at how these two different teams got to where they are, I guess what's your favorite way? Like, what to you as a GM surprises you about how building a roster can get you to the promised land?
I think it all comes down to the triumvirate of the general manager, the head coach, and the owner, and them sitting down and saying, what do we want our identity to be as a team, and how are we going to get there? This Super Bowl shows that there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to be competing for a championship, be it, hey, let's go all in on trades, free agency, and discount the need for draft choices and drafting and develop. And then there's the Bengals, where it's let's draft and develop and then supplement with free agency. So I think it's one of those things that is a positive to show there's more than one way to get to where you need to go. So you don't have to follow one set path. Now, with that said, whatever path you do follow, you have to be all in. You can't dip your toe and try to play both sides. You got to say, this is what we're all in, we're going to do, and this is the identity. Now, the interesting part about it's going to be is 2-3 years down the road, where are the Rams? Are they going to have to perpetuate this thought process of, all right, we're not going to have draft choices, but keep trading them away for veteran players? And is that sustainable? That's the biggest question. Knowing that it's been proving if you draft and develop and supplement with free agency, that's a more sustainable model.
Right. Right. I mean, I feel like now, of course, the then Washington Redskins, this did not work out, but going all in on Robert Griffin, having that not work and then having no draft capital, no first round picks to really help get them back. It's like that franchise immediately was set back, 5-6 years with not having those guys in and then developing. I mean, it took them until, the last 2 seasons to get back to a spot in contention. The Rams potentially could be setting themselves up for a long trek back.
Yes, I mean, because what you realize is when you are devoid of draft capital or you aren't very successful in the draft, it really affects you with depth and young, cheap talent. So when your starters, and that's one of the things you have to look at the Rams, they've been pretty healthy. Now they lost Robert Woods, but if they have a rash of injuries, they don't have those 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round draft choices that are on really cheap deals that can come in and get them through a stretch of games. That's where the issue is when you don't have that draft capital or you've hit on those draft choices. And that's where you can get stressed when injuries happen, because injuries are part of the game and you'll never get rid of them. But if you look at, I would love to do a study, and we did it last time I was in the league. If you look at the participants in the Super Bowl, 90% of the time they were the most healthy team throughout the year.
Growing up a New England Patriots fan, I live in the area, so I have no shame in saying I, born and raised in the cult up here. But it was incredible to me that everyone, more often than not, was healthy. Like those championship runs, almost all of them, like maybe 1 or 2 key guys were down. It was never more than that. So health was such a huge part, at least to the team that I've followed the most closely for the last 20 years. But I would love to see that study, because I don't think there's really any doubt. The second that the Buccaneers lost their 2 top corners in like the first week of the season, you knew the odds of them making it was going to be long.
No doubt about it. And again, you can help alleviate that stress if you've hit on a 3rd rounder that he's not quite a starter, but he's a great backup substitution guy that you can play with for 3 or 4 games and keep you 500. So that's the type of stuff. And then you don't have to go out and try to find a vet street free agent that you're going to have to pay a lot more than a guy on a rookie deal to come in. And then you have to worry, is this vet free agent, is he in shape? When's the last time he played? Is he going to have a soft tissue injury? So things start to snowball once you have injuries, if you don't have that young, cheap talent in there to supplement the injured guys.
Definitely. No, I do need to ask just a little bit more about the pressure cooker that you had lived in for most of your professional career, and still are, but specific to the NFL. You were behind trading up to get Sammy Watkins. You weren't afraid to pull the trigger on a pretty rare trade. I mean, you don't really see too many player-for-player deals. You get like a lot of draft picks for guys, but to trade Kiko Alonso for LaShawn McCoy, you clearly were not afraid to make big moves. Can you just talk a little bit about the guts it takes to actually pull the trigger and the due diligence it takes for you to actually feel comfortable to do that? Because again, these things don't happen that much in the NFL compared to other sports.
Well, I think one is the way I was brought up in this business is if you do the work and you're confident in your evaluation of the player and the deal makes sense, and it's a deal where everybody can walk away saying, hey, I feel good about it, then do the deal. And you have to make sure everybody's on board. So is it gutsy? Some would say that, but I think it's basically following the script of, like you said, we did the work, we did the due diligence, and the deal made sense at that time of where we were as a team, what we were trying to do, and what the deal would bring to us. You can see that the Rams are following that same motto. Hey, if the deal makes sense and it can get us where we need to go, let's do it. And like I said, I was always taught, don't be afraid to do the deal if you believe in it. Because the last thing you want to do is say, oh, I wish I would have done that.
Right. Now, getting to that point, how do you have to walk the line of not over analyzing? Because I mean, you can do that till kingdom come when it comes to looking at the future draft picks. But if it's, even a trade, how do you make sure that you've done enough and you're not getting to the point where now you're second guessing yourself on something that you originally were pretty firm in?
You have to develop a system. And that's one of the things I when I'm talking to young guys trying to get into the field is to say, don't be so quick to go from entry level to GM. Make sure you take every step and learn steps along the way of what best system that you want to implement when you get there. Because if you have your system in place and you have your checks and balances in place, then when you get to decision-making time, the work is done. And I always equate it to when you're practicing as a team. Practice is where all the work is. The game is fun. There should be no stress during the game. There should be everything set. The playbook is set. The plays are set. You know the checks. You know the substitutions. You know everything that can happen, and you're set. And if you have a chemistry, then you can anticipate some things. So when big decisions come, if you follow that system that you've developed over the years, and you believe in that system, then it's really not that big of a pressure cooker. The pressure is getting the work to get to that point where you make the decision. And then, like I said, if you believe in it and it's got you to where you are to be able to make those decisions, then go with it.
So when it comes to building that structure, how much of it was intuitive to you, and how much do you have to give credit to like a Kevin Colbert, or of course you were with Buddy Nix before you took over the GM role in Buffalo? Yeah, how much is it mentorship from specific individuals, or how much was pretty straightforward?
Well, I think it's a combination of everything. It's mentorship, because what happens is when you're working underneath someone, I was always taught every critical situation, put yourself in their shoes and then make the decision. And if it's the same decision, then you have the benefit of saying, okay, it worked out because of this, or it didn't work out because of this. And then you can say, well, I would have did it this way. And then if it's the same, you know the answer. If it's not, you go, okay, let me stick that in my thought process. And knowing the outcome that came up, how would that outcome have affected the decision that I made? So basically what I'm saying, it's mentorship, because you can see as a bystander all these situations and the outcome, but also it's intuitive. So when you get in there, it's, oh, I've been in this situation before, or I've seen it before, and these are the positives, the negatives, and the outcomes. Okay, let me put my spin on it and how I would have done it. So that it's a combination of things. I wouldn't say one more than the other.
Fair. That makes complete sense. So I have to ask, since you've watched so many guys make decisions, and of course you're making the decisions, at any point, whether it was your own or again, something that the Steelers had done or the Bills had done, was there ever a time where you look back and say, man, I really wish we did this instead of what we had done at the time?
I'll say this: when Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, it struck a chord with me, because they had some people could say whatever, they overloaded the quarterback position. And that was kind of a strange thing to do, to have a starter, but two high priced and capable backups. And then obviously, you know what happened with Carson Wentz going down, and then Foles coming in and win the championship for it. And I think they actually, that year, they even traded away Sam Bradford. So they had three legitimate quarterbacks that could bring value in one way or another, be it on the field or as a trade component. So my thought process has changed, is when you think you have a quarterback, that shouldn't stop you from getting another one or two, because injuries, like we've talked about, but also it's an asset, a tradable asset that you could use to better your team. So that's one of the things I wish I would have thought about or done when we were trying to decide if EJ was the guy or not. That should have said, okay, if we think he's the guy, let's get him. That shouldn't preclude us from getting another one, because if he is, that's great. We got a backup that's talented or trade asset. And if he's not the guy, then we're already in position to try and have a guy on roster to find out if he's that guy. So you're not delaying another decision and then spinning your wheels as an organization.
Totally. And this reminds me of what you had said before about, not on this show, but just speaking about in that time period. And then, Greg Roman's the OC, he wanted to go toward Matt Castle, but then Tyrod Taylor was sort of the guy that other people in the front office had preferred. And you're going to be in a position, I would imagine, as a GM, where you're going to have different input from different people that's sort of conflicting, and decisions are going to have to be made. At what point can you just speak generally about basically trying to, work with the coaches, not necessarily take orders from them, but if different coaches want different things, I mean, how did you, to kind of quote Bill Parcells, I want to buy the ingredients. How did you manage just navigating that relationship with trying it, I guess, to be fair in some sort of way?
Well, it all comes down to what's everybody's agenda. And if the agenda is to be right instead of getting it right, then that's when you have issues. But if everybody's agenda is to get it right, people are going to have favorites and people are going to want to do something. And there's some times where I wanted to do something, but it wasn't the right and best decision for the organization and how we had charted going forward. So you step back and say, okay. So it's one of those things where you really have to put your ego in check and make sure everything you're doing is for the betterment of the team to consistently compete for championships. And what people get in trouble is when they can't check that ego at the door, or they have a different agenda instead of trying to win games and win Super Bowls. So what you try to do when there's conflict or disagreements is say, okay, we disagree on this. Let's find something we do agree on that can help us put us on that path to where we want to go.
Now, of course, you only worked with two organizations. You can only have one job at a time. But if you were to speculate, how much of the NFL do you think is currently being run in a way where it's that one goal? And how much of the NFL do you think, if you look at the teams that aren't as successful, is there more of the I want to be right mentality?
Yeah, that's hard to say just because you're not in the day-to-day operations of those teams and to get the personalities of those people that are running the club. But I would just say that a lot of that can be seen by the consistency. If they're consistently in the conversation, then more often than not, everybody has that same agenda and everybody's working for that same goal. And that's how I would judge it.
Got it. I just wanted to pivot a little bit. We are in that Senior Bowl season. Everyone is spending all their time and energy. Maybe the general public after this game on Sunday will be looking toward the NFL draft. Man, it's so easy to see how you watch film, you see what they do at the combine, the Senior Bowl, all that stuff. As a GM and someone that obviously was very close to, working on roster composition and evaluating people, what to you is the best indication of someone was mentally ready? Because that's the obvious big question mark is, can this guy grasp the playbook? Can he grasp being a professional and just being mature? Well, did you have any clear ways of discerning if someone was going to be ready or not?
It's case by case basis, and it's basically sitting down and talking to the people and finding out, to these young men, finding out what makes them tick and finding out from not only them, but people that have been around them for multiple years in different situations, what their thought process of the player and what makes them tick, their positives and their negatives. What about their character do you think can propel them to stardom or greatness. And that's the hardest thing about scouting, be it any profession, especially athletic profession, because the most unpredictable beings on this earth are humans. And you're trying to predict what a human's going to become and how they're going to react in certain situations. And there's no 100% guide to say, if you take this test and they get this score, it's 100% they're going to turn out to be this. It's just, there's so many variables and so many question marks out there. And people, like I said, are so unpredictable. You just try to set up a system that has shown you in the past that it's a good predictor of success, but there's no 100% certainty that everything's going to come through. And that's why it's such a subjective business. And that's why a lot of people are starting to try to turn to analytics to help refine that decision-making capability to get it on a better place with the odds are in favor of success.
Of course. Yeah. No one wants to be wrong, particularly in the pressure cooker. So as we get toward wrapping up here, just can you speak on the pressure in general? I imagine that it's extremely intense. You basically have the entire world looking at 32 people who are the GMs of teams, making sure that like those teams win. Did you feel jumping from assistant GM to GM that there was extra added pressure with the media just being what it is?
I think the biggest thing I've always thought about is you never think about the magnitude of the job, because if you do that, you could get overwhelmed and burdened. You just think about doing the job at the best level you can. Now, the thing that is real prevalent now, that when I first got into it, it wasn't as over the top, but now it is. It's the scrutiny and the media pressure. Once you get into a job like that, the job becomes you and you become the job. The job defines you, who you are, and you are defined by the job, just because of the media pressure, the scrutiny, the popularity. When you go places, people know you. So that's one of the things that I would make sure, and I make sure I tell people that are moving up the ladder, that if you think you can do your job, shut it off, go home and be who you are, be Doug Whaley at home and then be GM Doug Whaley at work, that's not going to happen. Because it hit me my first year out on the job as a GM. I stopped being, hey, this is Doug Whaley, he works for the Bills, to this is GM Doug Whaley of the Bills. So that's when you start knowing, okay, this is my life and this is my life's work and this is who I am and it's going to define who I am. So that's something that you have to get used to.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if we were to talk to this, this kid in the mid to late 90s who's an area scout for the Seahawks, and we were to tell a young Doug Whaley, hey, by 2020, you would have accomplished all this stuff, would you have believed it? I want to get to the XFL, but I just to think about how the last 25-ish years have transpired. Did you have a goal? Were you always chasing to get to this point, or was it just trying to stick around football and all of a sudden things just kind of snowball?
I think I've done some research and I equate it to this. There's a difference. There's two different people in this world that are successful. There's ambitious people and there's driven people. And ambitious people they have a goal. They've had a goal for so long and they are put blinders on and say, no matter what, I'm accomplishing that goal. Then there's driven people, and driven people are, no matter what goal you put in front of me, I'm going to master that and be the best at it. I'm more of a driven person. My first job out of college was a stockbroker. I never even thought about getting into personnel evaluation, especially in the NFL, but I had the chance. Okay, let me try it and let me try to be the best at it. Every job I've been in, I've just tried to be the best, especially in athletics, try to be the best I can and help that team win. Everything else takes care of itself after that. It's now people just think, though, that just because I have a job, then I should move up. No, there are steps you have to take and you have to prove yourself. And one of the ways to prove yourself is to have success. You have the team you work for have success. That's why you see New England have all those assistant coaches going to be head coaches, all those personnel people going to be GM, because they've had success. It's all predicated on success.
I love it. So, Doug, I know I can't ask a whole bunch about the XFL, but you are the senior VP of player personnel as they're getting ready to relaunch and have games being played again. Can you just speak a little bit about what this role is going to be? Obviously, you bring a tremendous amount of knowledge to the table, but I'm just curious, going from a team's GM to now a league's VP of player personnel, how does that sort of change now when you're looking at, I would imagine, the caliber of people across the entire league as opposed to the one organization?
It's different, and it's a great. I love a new challenge, and the way the basis of the role is anything that touches the player and a player life cycle, I will be overseeing. Now, the main part of it will be populating the player pool for each individual team to assess and evaluate for their draft. So instead of looking at, okay, we have a 4-3 and we're running a spread offense, let's find players for that. I'm looking at, okay, I need to make sure that there's players in this player pool that can play 4-3, 3-4, outside linebackers, or 4-3 DNs, and just stocking it for every type of system that our teams may employ. So that's the major difference. But the other thing that adds to this role is, okay, let's talk about a day in the life of a player from when he gets up to go when he goes to bed. How is that? And let's make sure we structure that so he can optimize his ability on the football field and not have to worry about a bunch of extraneous things that may affect him. So that, okay, let's talk about contracts. How can we structure these contracts so it's most advantageous? We can get the best guys out there that want to play in our league, but also know that if they play well, then they have options to go do something else. So those are the type of things that make this job very exciting and new and challenging.
That's awesome. I mean, you bring such an incredible, amount of experience to the table, not just as an NFL GM, but you were also the football ops guy for the 2020 season. So, I mean, you're the perfect guy for the job. I can't wait for when games start to get played. I was excited to see, what the initial product was, and obviously it's only heading in the right direction. So it'll be fun. I can't wait for it.
I appreciate that. And that's our whole goal is, if you're a fan of football, you should love more football. And we're just going to be a piece of the football ecosystem for players, coaches, administrators, video directors, anybody that is part of this football ecosystem. Here's another outlet for you to live out your dream. And that's what we're trying to offer people.
Absolutely. So, Doug, in closing, I just have a couple of very quick questions for you. It's called the Gauntlet. I ask all my guests the same stuff. So I need your reaction to a couple of things. And, as someone that, of course, has been there, what it takes to put together a winning franchise. What do you need today? What's most important? Is it having or building the number one offense or the number one defensive? Ultimately, you just want to win. I'm not talking about numbers and attendance or TV ratings.
I would say now it'd be offense, just because the game's rigged for offensive production, the rules and everything.
It's fair. I can't argue against that. Now, this I'm really interested to hear. Players or scheme, which is most important in winning?
I would say the Jimmies and Joes are better than the X's and O's.
A line that I've heard many a times. I certainly agree.
Mm-hmm.
Now, favorite football memory? You've been around the game for so long. Is there anything in particular that really stands out for you?
I would have to say the first championship I won, we won a state championship when I was in high school and went undefeated. So that gave me a taste of what a championship, and not only a taste of what the outcome is, but what also a taste of what it takes to on that journey to get that goal and get to that goal and accomplish the goal.
Nice. Now, lastly, and I think it's most important, you have obviously built professionally a great deal of success. If you were to look at a young student athlete, call it a high school age student, what would you say to them as to what's the best piece of advice for being able to put together a successful career and achieve the highest highs?
Don't be so fast. Slow your roll. That's basically it. I mean, we're living in an instant society where everybody wants things yesterday. I would say enjoy the journey and take your time, because the issue is if you speed past a lot of these steps, when you get there, you won't be ready and you won't be prepared, and you'll have a harder time achieving success because you don't have that background to refer to. Because like we were talking about it before, a lot of it is personal experience. And because the higher you go up the ladder, the less you're actually going to be doing to get that got you there. When you're a GM, you do a lot less scouting. So what you have to do is rely on the information given you and your experience to make decisions. And if you don't have those experiences, you're going to struggle making great decisions.
There it is. Doug, I could have asked you a million more questions, but thank you so much for taking the time. It was really a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and let's have a great Super Bowl. Take care.